I lost my mother to illness when I was in elementary school. My father was the one who worked hard to raise me. I loved my gentle father dearly. When I married my husband Ethan, my father shed tears and said, "Please, take good care of Lily." My only concern was Ethan's parents. Both my father-in-law and mother-in-law graduated from prestigious private universities. They were true elites. Father-in-law established his own company when he was young and literally made a fortune in one generation. However, not long after we married, the company went bankrupt. It was because mother-in-law, who was registered as an executive, spent too much of the company's money. My desperate in-laws suggested moving in together. "Clearly, we're going to have children, and we can't afford to support you," Ethan argued. Listening to my husband's words, I sighed with relief. Unless there was a need for caregiving, I wanted to avoid living with my in-laws. It seemed my husband felt the same. Then father-in-law yelled, "Are you repaying the kindness of raising you with ingratitude?" Mother-in-law began to cry. "This is what happens when you marry a woman from a poor family. You've become rotten to the core." My in-laws wanted to live together. We wanted to avoid it. The conversation got nowhere. "It's really impossible to live together, but maybe we can send some money." My husband said that, and I glared at him. But paying money meant we wouldn't have to live together. I chose the option that would lighten my mental burden, persuaded by my husband. However, this was the beginning of our troubles. The agreement was to provide $300 a month, but they kept asking for additional money every month, saying, "We can't pay for medical bills and medicine," or "My back hurts, so I need to go to a chiropractor." I had my doubts about whether this was true, but I didn't feel like going to check. If we refused, they might bring up living together again. I grappled with frustration, but endured the constant begging for money. Our finances were barely making ends meet every month. That's why I started working part-time at a bar, leaving my young son Noah at the childcare center. The bar paid well, and they would let me take home leftover food. Somehow, we managed to stabilize our finances. And when Noah turned 10, my husband was ordered to transfer by his company. Since the transfer was to a rural area, Noah and I considered moving with him. But my husband said, "It's better to be near your father," and thought of my father, who lived alone. My father's house was about 20 minutes away by train. The transfer location was at a distance that required the use of a bullet train. I decided to rely on my husband's words. While I was working at the bar, my father would take care of Noah. He seemed happy to spend time with his grandson. I would take home food from the bar, and my father, Noah, and I would gather around the dining table. Noah, who never warmed up to his paternal grandparents, was unreservedly affectionate with my father. My humble and grandson-loving father, on the other hand, was the complete opposite of my in-laws. They would brazenly claim to be my parents and eat and drink as they pleased at the bar where I worked, leaving without paying. I paid all their bills. They didn't come often, but they seemed to show off to friends or juniors when they did. Once or twice a month, it still hurt to pay for them from my part-time earnings. The manager often sent something and gave me substantial discounts, saying, "You're always working hard." I want to splash beer on them someday. How satisfying that would feel. I indulged in fantasies of defeating my in-laws. In the fall of Noah's junior year in high school, preparing for university entrance exams, I received a call from my husband. "I can come home in the spring." "Really?" "Yeah, and with a promotion to boot. I really put you through a lot. Let's live happily together again, the three of us." Next spring is looking busy. As soon as I hung up, the electronic sound of an incoming call rang out. Thinking it was my husband, I answered without looking. "What?" I inadvertently let out a careless, deflated voice. "Hello, this is the city hospital?" The caller explained the urgent matter in a tense voice. My father had collapsed and was taken to the hospital. He had stopped to buy Noah's favorite pudding at a convenience store and fainted in front of the cashier. I grabbed only my wallet and phone and rushed to the hospital. Although I couldn't get many details, I was told my father was in emergency surgery. "Dad!" I called out to him, praying, "Please make it. Please." When I arrived at the hospital, I gave the reception staff my father's name. "I heard he's in surgery now." I pressed the staff at the front desk, drenched in sweat. "Please head to the 4th floor." I was directed to the operating room. The surgery wasn't over yet, so I sat on the bench, praying and waiting. Several hours later, the doctor informed me the surgery was done. The diagnosis was a stroke. There would be a slight impairment in speech and motor functions, but I was nothing but grateful that his life was spared. Dad's condition gradually stabilized. During my free time, I visited the hospital, talking to Dad, even giving his immobile hand a massage. "Dad, today, Noah." I made sure to tell Dad all about Noah. His initial response was weak, but daily rehab was fruitful, and Dad started to show signs of recovery. One day, while massaging his hand as usual, Dad weakly grasped my hand. It was the first response since the surgery, and I was so happy that I cried. "Dad, you did great." Then, Dad slowly shook his head and pointed at me with the hand he could move. "Thank you," he stuttered, smiling. He should have had difficulty moving his facial muscles, yet he smiled at me. Stroke aside, Dad seemed to have aged, becoming smaller. I recalled him at the wedding. "Take good care of Lily," he had said, firmly shaking hands with my husband. Strong, dependable hands. Now they had become small, so it was my turn to protect Dad. I firmly grasped my thin father's hand, encouraging myself. I had to leave the hospital before evening, as I had a part-time job at the bar. I hope Dad continues to recover. I started my job full of hope. My in-laws were the first to enter when the shop opened. "Lily, dear," they called cheerfully. They brought along 2 men, a bit older than themselves. I didn't care how they were related, and didn't care to know, so I led them to their seats, following the restaurant's protocol. "As soon as you sit, order as much as you like," said father-in-law. "Don't worry about the bill," added mother-in-law, as if they won't just push it onto me again. I focused on serving them, hiding my annoyance. I'd just had good news about Dad, after all. The peaceful events at the hospital were ruined by the in-laws in front of me. Sure enough, they knew no bounds. They ordered beer, soju, sake, one after another. The table was a mess, with spilled drinks and food scraps. The 2 men they brought seemed drunk and started harassing me. "Hey, wife, bring the beer, quickly." What a shame. Our daughter-in-law here. Really, such an incapable wife. The in-laws began to loudly criticize me on purpose. I tried to hold back since I was at work, but my heart couldn't contain it. "Excuse me, customers! There are others here. Can you please quiet down a bit?" I attempt a desperate counterattack. I hoped that by speaking loud enough for other customers to hear, it would embarrass my in-laws. "It's just a party. Who cares?" That's what they mean by "you can tell where someone's from." "Look, your plate's open, ma'am." Fueled by alcohol, their remarks escalated. "It seems she was raised so carelessly because she has no mother." I was so entangled by my mother-in-law's words that I couldn't respond. I was already holding back at the edge of my limits from having my daughter Noah insulted. But now they're even mentioning my late mother. I've always wanted to splash beer on them. Imagining defeating my in-laws like this had become part of my daily routine. That day, I was virtually pouring a bottle of flat beer over their heads. In my imagination, of course. And in January, Noah was accepted into his first choice private university. On the day of the acceptance announcement, my husband also called and brought the happy news that he could come home the day before Noah's graduation ceremony. We would both be attending Noah's graduation. The night of the graduation, we had planned to celebrate Noah's success and my husband's promotion at the bar where I worked. But that meant we couldn't avoid inviting my in-laws. My father was still in the hospital, so he couldn't come, but ignoring my in-laws would cause problems later. I prayed that they would be busy, but if they knew we were treating them, they would definitely come. They were two such despicable people. When I called to invite them, sure enough, both agreed to come. Noah's new private university is known nationwide as a prestigious institution, and my father-in-law pompously said, "He inherited my genes." Well, see you on that day. I quickly ended the call. The night of Noah's graduation, I happily walked to the restaurant with my husband and Noah, the three of us together, after a long time. The in-laws had already arrived by taxi, I was informed. The restaurant manager had kindly prepared a private room for our celebration. Just thinking about my in-laws made my stomach ache. Still, I decided to smile as much as possible in front of the family and entered the restaurant. We took our seats and toasted with bottled beer for the adults, juice for Noah. "Noah, congratulations!" My husband smiled warmly at him. "Congratulations on your promotion," I said to my husband, raising my glass. "I'm really looking forward to college in the spring," Noah exclaimed. "Here, this is from Grandpa." I handed Noah a cherry-colored envelope. Grandpa here refers to my father, of course. "From Grandpa?" Noah joyfully accepted the envelope. "It's not much, but he said to enjoy college life. Grandpa prepared this celebration gift with a nurse's help, even though his hands still aren't moving properly," I explained. Just knowing my father's feelings was enough. I had reported to my in-laws over the phone that my father had a stroke and was hospitalized. They were out playing and only responded, "Oh, really?" Watching them, it suddenly hit me. "Speaking of which, it's really tough, huh? A stroke," he said nonchalantly. I was used to it by now, so I brushed it off. Yes, it is. But the progress is good. My father-in-law didn't seem to like my indifferent attitude and mocked my collapsed father. "It's a brain disease, right? His head's gone crazy, hasn't it?" Noah's brow furrowed as he looked at father-in-law. Quick to counter, my husband spoke up. "Is that any way to talk?" "But it's the truth, isn't it?" "Yes, it's a brain disease, right?" The in-laws were not at all shaken by their son's argument. The boastful in-laws couldn't help but enjoy the misfortune of others. "Just stop it," my husband began to say, but I held up my hand to his face. Then I splashed the lukewarm beer that was left in the glass right onto father-in-law. The flat beer left in the bottle was poured over my mother-in-law. I could endure them speaking ill of me. If it doesn't reach Noah's ears, I can bear it, but I couldn't stand to hear them say that my father, who had raised me with all his might, was crazy. My father's hand had become so small. It was up to me to protect that hand. I glared at my in-laws. "Don't mock my father." The in-laws were at a loss for words, having beer suddenly thrown on them. "It was just a joke! Come on!" Father-in-law retorted in a low voice. My husband then countered, "Dad? Mom?" They slowly looked up at their son's voice. "There's a reason why I invited you here today." My husband pulled out a single note from his wallet. He placed it where the in-laws could see, like a slap in the face. On it was a detailed list of the in-laws' extravagant spending. A bus tour with friends, luxury spa treatment, purchasing designer bags, and much more. "You can find out about this stuff easily," he said. The in-laws no longer tried to make eye contact. Everything my husband had found seemed to be true. "If you can afford to live so luxuriously, you don't need our support anymore," I quickly followed up. "No, that, well, Cutting off father's indecisive words, I said, "You don't need it, right?" "But just the allowance," mother-in-law pleaded. "No, we won't send any more money. We're cutting ties too." My husband stated firmly, "Please go home." My disheveled and soaked in-laws looked at me with stunned expressions. "Please leave." I pointed to the exit and said it once again. Under the pressure of my firm stance, my in-laws slithered out as if crawling on the floor. It seemed my husband knew everything. He knew the torment I was going through. Apparently, Noah would sometimes stop by the bar to say thanks for the meals. But, embarrassed to be seen by me, he waited until I wasn't there. At that time, the manager had been reporting to Noah how I was being treated by my in-laws. "It's hard to tell a child this, but please protect your mom," he was told. Noah had discussed this with my husband. My husband had declared that when he returned, he would sever ties and stop all financial support. However, he had asserted that it would only be carried out once he was back, since he couldn't protect Noah or me when he was away. And so, my husband stopped the payments as promised. Every day, my in-laws called, probably to demand the money. Before cutting ties completely, I unleashed everything I wanted to say to my in-laws. There's nothing to fear, since I'm ending this relationship. After ending the call unilaterally, I blocked my in-laws' contact. A few days later, my in-laws seemed to have asked my part-time job's manager to help them get in touch with me. They did this multiple times during business hours. The manager, annoyed, lost his temper. "Don't ever come back to our store!" he yelled, throwing an empty beer bottle and chasing them out. In the conversation between my in-laws at that time, I heard words like payments and monthly installments. So it seems they are likely taking cash advances or making installment payments, unable to lower their standard of living. Serves them right. I'm now working at the second bar, opened by the manager. He made arrangements to ensure that my in-laws couldn't harm me if they came to the store. My father will be discharged from the hospital soon, and it's decided that we'll live together in this house. My husband and Noah both fully agreed. As I cleaned the room that will be dedicated to my father, I thought back to his small hands.